Hello, been a while. How's everybody doing? Hope you're good. Uh, I am. So, today I'm going to try to talk about Israel. This is a message to Native Americans, especially, but also African Americans, and just to everybody, especially race baiters. Um, so, it's hard for me to explain everything that I want to explain to you without telling you so much information that'd be overwhelming. It'd take me 5 hours. To compile all the evidence up and show it to you. So I'm just going to jump in. I'm going to try to skip some things as I go along, jump around a little bit, but try to stay on course of getting to today as quickly as possible. From Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, who I hope everybody knows who those three names are. And then this is where it gets interesting. See, Jacob had a twin brother. Now, it all started when Rebecca was pregnant. Um, she didn't know what was going on because the pregnancy was just so difficult. So she went to a prophet, Shem, and he told her that she had twins. There's no ultrasounds or anything to figure that stuff out. So he said, you had twins, and your womb isn't big enough for them because the whole world isn't going to be big enough for them to dwell peacefully. So how can your womb be big enough? Basically how he said it. And so they fought over who was going to be the older brother in the womb. And Jacob won, Israel. And he was just about to go out, like the day of the birth. And Rebecca almost died. And that was Esau grabbing her heart and trying to kill her in order to be let out first. He said he was going to kill her. So Jacob let him go first. Or that's the legend. And so then Esau came out, but Jacob was so close behind him that he actually had his hand on his foot. He was grabbing his heel. That's what Jacob means, is heel grabber or subplanter. Um, so, and then Esau was born. He was different looking than all the other Hebrews. He was red and hairy. So anyways, they grow up together. And Jacob's pious and good, God-loving. Esau's worldly. He gathers men like to follow him and stuff like that, and he wants them to follow him and not God and stuff. Anyway, marries a bunch of women that are all paganists and whatever, and um, uh, anyway, comes time for Isaac to die, and he says, I'm going to bless you as my oldest son, Esau. Go out, hunt me a deer, bring it back, cook it up, and then I'll be in the spirit to bless you after I eat. Rebecca overheard that. She got Jacob, dressed him up in lamb's coats and stuff like this, and Esau's clothes, and Isaac was blind, so he Jacob could pass as Esau. And then she cooked up a couple lambs that she used the skin off of to make the hair, and then he brought it in and gave it to his dad, and he gets the blessing. The blessing is that the dew of earth will yield itself to Jacob wherever he is, and that men will want to serve him. Men and women and stuff will be happy servants of him, and he'll be like a just leader of men. So And there's more to it. But anyways, he gets this big blessing. And Esau is out. He can't get a deer. God kept him out there, kept him teasing him with this deer till he finally gives up. He goes and he kills a dog, brings that home, cooks it up, and going to present it to his dad. And he brings it in, and his dad's like, I already blessed you. Who are you, right? And then he figures it out, and he's all sad, pissed off, and he says, there must be some blessing left for me. And Isaac blesses him and says, basically, you'll dwell in the dew of the earth by your sword. So Esau's going to be a leader and in a way that, well, he's going to take things by war. And he did. He vowed to kill Jacob, and Jacob had to leave the family and go live in the woods with Shem and Abraham. And then he stayed there for like 27 years, I think. Anyway, and then he comes home, and Esau had kind of forgotten about everything. He didn't really care about the blessings and stuff like that anyways. And he'd forgotten because he was living the life, right? He had everything. He had the house to himself. He had all the possession, all the farms, all the women, and all, he's good. And he's worldly. He didn't care about the blessing for his children. He cared about it for himself. So anyhow, he freaking bunch of shit happens, whatever. I can't remember it all. Anyway, Jacob goes off, and Rebecca says, I want you to marry a Jew. So go to your uncles and marry his daughters, and which was normal back then. So off he goes, and to Laman's, and he has to serve there for. Esau sends thieves after him and robs him for everything. So when he gets there, he's broke, and he has to serve Laman for his daughters rather than because he brought like a bunch of gold and silver and blessings that he was going to give to him to get his daughter, kind of thing. Anyway, and then Laman tricks him and marries him to the wrong girl. All this other shit happens. I don't think any of that's important. So those two have a big life. All this stuff happens. The sons are born. The Esau's sons are born. They all hate each other. They all fight with each other. And then generations go by of them fighting and hating each other. And then Israel falls away from God, and they get invaded. I can't remember the invasion for some reason. Anyways, maybe Babylon. And they're being taken. They're raided and taken out. And then Esau at the time was like watching, laughing, praising it up. They were going into the town and stealing stuff when they got the chance. And then if they found any Jews, they were giving them over. And then when there were certain Jews that had gotten away and they were trying to get out the back path, they cut them off in the path and gave them over as well. And so anyways, they get cursed. And Israel gets cursed as well because they fell away from their God again. And so Israel's curse turns out that with the blessing, like I said earlier, he's got to do with the earth and men want to serve him. But if that will only happen when he's under God. When he's not under God, he'll be a slave. Okay? And then Esau gets cursed at the same time for doing all that stuff during the calamity. And what his curse is that if Israel is under God, Esau will be servant to Israel. But if Israel's not under God, then Israel will be slave to Esau. And you'll notice the different words, slave and servant. A servant is more like a willing participant, somebody who enjoys their job. That's the way it's described, right? It's somebody who gets up in the morning and it's like, oh, good. I know I'm going to get paid well today. I got to go do my job. And I'm going to enjoy it. And all that kind of stuff. A slave is the way we live in our society. So you work just to survive. You get just enough. You work basically all the time, and you get paid just enough to keep yourself alive in order to work more, right? Like you can't. It would be pointless to have slaves and let them freeze to death without a house, or to let them starve to death without food. You can't do that. You need to feed them and you need to house them and shit. So, same shit. So then, at one of the points where it's the Maccabees, where Israel is under God, they actually invaded Edom. They invade Edom, and they tell them, you either got to move or convert to Judaism. And a lot of people say that was a huge mistake, but it says from that day forward, they were no different from Jews, right? Because they're of the same bloodline, Abraham, Isaac, Esau, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? Like they're right in that bloodline, and now they're living as Jews, doing all the things, living under God. So they could easily just blend right in. They'd look different, but that was it. So then they infiltrate the religion totally, break it up into sects, where they had the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and there was a third group that I can never remember the name of it. They're gone now. They went kind of, I don't know, not extinct, but they just kind of got beat out in the end. But Jesus went into the temple and he flips over the tables and whips, and that's a real famous thing. Well, he says to them, I know about the men who call themselves Jews, but are the synagogue of Satan. Well, that's Edom, right? But now, what Edom has done since then is they've convinced the world. See, after Christ, I best tell you this. After Christ dies and all the disciples die, and then whatever goes by, say 500 years or something, the Catholic religion's really big, and Judaism's back, and it's going along with all these Edomites. And so they get together and they separate the Bible into the Jewish books and the Christian books. And then they called the Jewish books Apocrypha, which means the hidden books. And within those books is all the information that you would need to understand who Edom is and to follow that timeline, right? So they took those books out and keep them from the Christians so that they're kind of blind. They don't really see what the hell. And then they took the New Testament books and stuff, and they pulled them out from the Jews and are keeping them from getting anywhere near their true place as well. Not that they're Edomites, they don't really have, but they can easily become Christian, Hebrews, like I am, and follow Christ and the Hebrew doctrine, like Jesus held the books in his hands and said, these are the words of God, the inherent word of God, and I'm not here to destroy it. Like he made it all stronger and better. The Old Testament said, thou shalt not kill. Jesus said, don't even think about killing. If you've made the thought in your mind, you've already done the sin. Thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife. Jesus said, don't covet any woman, even in your mind. Like, not just to physically do it. You don't even think about doing it. Because you've already sinned. And he did that for all of the commandments. Made them stronger and more clear. And that was his thing. Because the false Jews were muddying up the religion and making it, they were like taking all these little things out of context and using them to make money and to control people and stuff like that and have power over people. And that's not what religion's about at all. That's not what the Bible is. So anyways, those are those people. So then years later, they remove all those books, and then sometime in there, Israel gets invaded again. But this time, what had gone, they all went away from Christ again, and the 10 tribes, the northern tribes, were like one group, and the southern tribes were another group, and they weren't getting along, the leadership, and but the southern tribes had the temple, so they had all the northern tribes had to go to the temple in order to worship every year or whatever it is, and especially on the Sabbaths and stuff. So every 7 years, whatever. Anyway, so the northern tribe leadership were like, oh, we can't have them going down there because it could end in like peace, or they could defect from us and want to stay there with their God. So they made another temple and put up idols and got them to worship these idols in this other temple. And then, of course, the invasion come in, and they came in from the west and like split the tribes and invaded both ways. And they pushed the northern tribes out, and they pushed the southern tribes south. They pushed the northern tribes north. The southern and all of them went into what's called a diaspora, where you're a whole people, and you're trying to settle somewhere, and every time you settle, the native people from that land pushes out, and then you settle again, and the native people from that land pushes out, and that's called the diaspora. So the southern tribes went diaspora all through, started in Egypt, and we followed them all through Africa, right down to the farthest south, right where the slave trade was. And the northern tribes went up into Europe, and then right across Russia and all across northern Europe, and disappeared. Nobody knows where they went. Well, where'd they go? They obviously came here to America. So we found the walking trails, or they made boats or whatever, right? Like there's ways to get here. They figured it out. They got here. We can prove that by the language. They had the breastplate of Israel. They were worshiping in certain ways, and the alphabet from the natives and the Israelites are the only alphabets with 22 letters. Their languages are just so similar. All the vowel structures the same and everything. That was them. That is them. That's where they went. They didn't just vanish, obviously. And all life started in Africa. So those people, the Native Americans, had to come from fucking somewhere. So we got all these people that call themselves tribes, talk like Israelites, had the 12 chest plates of the Israelites, worship like Israelites, and the Israelites are missing. Come on. and they disappeared like around China and Japan. So, and the natives look like a mixture of Israelites, like Middle Eastern people and Japanese. I imagine the Japanese were already over here, and the Israelites just came over, found the trail that they were walking on. We found the trail; it's just under some water. Um, but we also found places all over Earth, like the Grand Canyon, that when you fill them in, make huge lakes. Huge lakes. Like the Grand Canyon made 3 states completely underwater. We found the shorelines of the beaches, or of the lake shores, and it's got no delta, which means it was cut quickly, and it's got rivers going into it at greater than 90-degree angles, which means it was cut recently. So all the evidence says that that was cut quickly, recently, and held enough water to change the altitude of the ocean. And then there's places like that all over Earth. So if God let them all go at once the Israelites were protected, raised the waters up, sealed them off, so that they could flourish, protected over here, and until they were tracked down and found. And that's what Columbus did. He didn't come here to trade spices with Asians or whatever the hell. They noticed the water line came way up, and they said, well, something had to displace that water, and Israel's gone. Let's go see what the hell. And then you're fed a different story about history, right? Anyway, and then so all the evidence says that that's those tribes. And now the other 2 tribes that went south, they ended up in a right down in southern Africa, right where the slave trade come from. And now when you look into the slave trade, all the ships, all the auction houses, most of the farms were all owned and managed by Jews. And then they would own the farm, and what they did, and you can read this in writings, it's sick. They had white slaves, and they told them, you guys cannot become civilized unless you get slaves of your own. You have to learn to manage your own slaves and all this shit. And they sold this to them. And so then they were like, so we're going to build this building. We'll put you up in it. You run it, and we'll give you all these slaves, and you put them all to work and manage them, and you'll live really good. You'll live like one of us, and your family will get a taste for that, and eventually you'll become an upper class, more classy race of people rather than being the slaves that you are. But you can't just become classy without having the slaves. Like they sold it this way. Anyway, so they owned the farms, they owned the ships, and then they owned the auction houses. And what they would do is they'd have farms of their own, and they'd have hundreds of slaves on these farms, and the tax man would come there and be like, oh, we're going to tax all these slaves. And he'd be like, oh, no, they're just his temporary possession. They're only just staying here until auction day at the end of the month. And so he wouldn't, I'll pay the tax when I sell them. And so they'd get all this free labor for the month. Auction day would come, they'd sell off all those slaves, bring in a bunch of new slaves that would work that farm for a month until they would be auctioned off as well. So they were doing all these scams and shit, but it was all these Edomites, so-called Jews, perpetrating and running it. And then what they did was they separated the families, changed the names, wiped out the older generations of natives and of the Africans, so that there was no writings and there was no word of mouth history being passed down generation to generation anymore. So now they had the control of the narrative of whatever your history is. You know, you're not the lost 10 tribes of Israel that came over here, walked over here from China, or boated over here from China. You're Native Americans that just appeared here from fucking nowhere or whatever. And you guys aren't Israelites. You're just Africans. You're just one of the many African tribes that, and you weren't even a singular tribe. You're just random Africans from all over that somehow the other Africans hated. Doesn't make any sense, right? But if you know that those are the Israelites and they were having trouble with all the African tribes as they were trying to settle, they kept pushing them out and pushing them out and pushing them out and pushing them out, and but couldn't defeat them, but could push them out by, you know, destroying wells or killing cattle or whatever, and then get them to move, and then these white men, whatever, these Jews came over and said, "Oh, we'll give you rum and guns and bullets, and you just go catch us Israelites, and we'll give you guns and bullets and rum for them." And so they wanted the rum, and they needed the guns and bullets in order to get the rum for the slaves, right? So they made all these trades, and that's, you know, that's the difference between African people and the Hebrew people, is that um, they're totally different and they didn't like each other. Now, as they went down through, I'm sure they took slaves from Africans, and I'm sure some Jews got taken by Africans or whatever, and so they got darker in color. And then, like I was saying about the 10 tribes, they went to China and got different features. That's why the natives, like, they have that long silky hair like Chinese people or Japanese people, and they got not slanted eyes, but their eyes are a different shape. They're really pretty shape, and but they're still big, and they're, you know what I mean, they have the features of the Middle Eastern, but it's mixed in with that Japanese kind of look, and that's why we can't quite put our finger on who they are, you know. And you wouldn't think that the African American ones and the Native American, you wouldn't see them as being from the same tribes, you know, from the same family. But melanin, see that sun on my skin. If I'm in the sun all day, every day, all the time, all year round, and so I build up melanin in my skin, and then I make a baby. That baby's going to have more natural melanin than I did. And if my wife's in the sun, same thing, right? And now that baby's in the sun his whole life, so his baby is going to be naturally darker as well. Like, that'll just naturally, slowly happen. Like, it won't be a noticeable darker born, like, you know what I mean? But he'll tan darker, way dark, you know, and he'll have more capability of storing melanin and stuff like that for longer periods of time, so he won't lose his tan. Like, if I get a big tan all summer, in the winter, you know, it doesn't take a month and it's gone, you know, or two, whatever it is. It's not long and it's gone. And I'm back to white again. So that's other part of how they got darker. But then obviously they were, like I said, they would have been taking slaves and stuff like that, and the beautiful women, and making babies with them, and then those babies would have been part of the family, and, you know, so on and so forth. Anyhow, which brings us into today, where we all think the Bible's not real, because a part of why we think the Bible's not real, I guess, is because, the Israelites are back in the Middle East and there's no peace. That's not the Israelites in the Middle East, it's Edom in the Middle East. So there cannot be peace because Edom needs war. That's how we can recognize Edom, is that he'll need war in order for his leadership to be sustained. Even if it's just like pointless war, just pick wars at random, make wars, blow up your own buildings, and then go attack people saying that they did it, like just anything you can do to be a constant war, because that's how you're going to stay in power. That's your blessing, that's your curse. And then even if you're not the one aggressing, you'll be aggressed against, because it's part of your curse to be at war. You're going to rule by the sword, so your sword's going to need to be out, but you're going to win. Until Israel goes up against you with God on their side. Then you're going to lose, and you're going to lose quick. And the change from one to the other is symbolic of Jacob's hand being on Esau's heel when they were born. That's how quick one leadership is going to lead into the next. That's what they say. And it has in the past. So anyway, what do you guys think? Let me know. God bless. Have a great day. Talk to you later.